They called humanity's silence a surrender until the aliens realized it was a countdown. In the year 2387, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. The humans simply left, not with fanfare, not with threats, not with the dramatic declarations that had become their trademark in the Galactic Council chambers. They departed in silence, like morning mist dissolving before the sun. Ambassador Zethkri of the Vorthic Collective stood before the towering holographic displays in the council chambers, his 6 eyes scanning the data streams with growing confusion. The reptilian diplomat's scales shifted from their usual deep green to a concerned amber as he processed what he was seeing. Fellow representatives, Zethkri announced to the assembled council members, his voice carrying across the crystalline chamber, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Our monitoring stations report that human vessels are departing every major system they've inhabited. Colony ships, trade vessels, military cruisers, all moving toward the galactic rim. High Counselor Vexandra of the Ethereal Dominion materialized, more solidly, her translucent form taking on an almost opaque quality, a sign of deep concern among her species. Departing. To where? Our intelligence networks show no signs of new human settlements beyond the established colonies. That's just it, Zethkri continued, his clawed hands manipulating the holographic display. They're not heading to any known destinations. They're leaving the galaxy entirely. Every single human vessel, from the massive colony arcs to the smallest personal craft, is moving toward dark space. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien languages as representatives from dozens of species began talking at once. Clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, and subsonic rumbles filled the air until High Counselor Vexandra restored order with a pulse of psychic energy. Trade Minister Gorthic of the Mercantile Union, a hulking creature that resembled a cross between a rhinoceros and a crab, slammed his massive fists on the speaking podium. Good riddance, he bellowed, his voice like grinding stone. Those unpredictable mammals have been nothing but trouble since they first stumbled into our space. Always questioning our decisions, always pushing boundaries, always acting like they know better than species with millennia more experience. Murmurs of agreement rippled through several sections of the chamber. The humans had indeed been problematic members of the galactic community. Their tendency toward rapid technological advancement, their refusal to accept because that's how it's always been done as a valid answer, and their irritating habit of finding solutions to problems that other species had simply learned to live with had made them many enemies. Perhaps this is for the best, mused Counselor Theiss of the Academic Consortium, her serpentine form coiled elegantly around her speaking platform. The humans have always been disruptive. Their presence has caused more upheaval in the last century than we've seen in the previous millennium. Maybe now we can return to the proper order of things, but not everyone in the chamber shared this sentiment. Junior Representative Kale of the Peaceful Worlds, a diminutive humanoid species, with large, dark eyes, raised his hand tentatively. Honored counselors, might I suggest we consider why the humans are leaving? In my limited dealings with them, they've never retreated from anything. They fight losing battles just for the principle of it, for them to leave so completely. So, quietly something must have prompted this decision. Nonsense, scoffed Minister Gorthic. They've finally realized they're outmatched. We've kept them in their place for decades, limiting their expansion, controlling their trade routes, ensuring they understand their position in the galactic hierarchy. They're cutting their losses and running. High Counselor Vexandra's form shimmered as she considered the implications. Regardless of the reasons, we must address the practical concerns. Human space encompasses nearly 30 star systems and hundreds of inhabited worlds. Their sudden departure creates a power vacuum that will need to be managed. An opportunity, you mean? Gorthic corrected with what might have been a smile on his craggy features. Those systems are rich in resources. Their worlds are already terraformed and ready for colonization. We can divide them among the member species according to contributions to the Council. The next several hours were spent in heated debate as various species laid claim to different human systems. The Vorthok wanted the industrial worlds, the ethereal dominion claimed the planets with unique crystalline formations, and the mercantile union eyed the major trade hubs. Minor species argued for their share, while the older, more established civilizations divided up the choicest territories among themselves. Through it all, a few voices of caution continued to speak up. Admiral Kethver of the Defense Coalition, a warrior species that had fought alongside humans in several border conflicts, tried to warn the Council about the implications of humanity's departure. "Honored counselors," he said, his scarred face grave with concern, "you're treating this as a victory, but I urge you to reconsider. I fought beside humans. I've seen what they're capable of when pushed. They don't retreat, they regroup. They don't give up, they find another way. If they're leaving, it's not because we've defeated them. It's because they've chosen to leave. And what difference does that make?" asked Counselor Theiss dismissively. "They're gone, we have their territory. What could they possibly do to us?" From outside the galaxy, Admiral Kethver's expression darkened further. "I don't know. But I do know that underestimating humans has never ended well for anyone." His warnings fell on deaf ears. The Council was too busy celebrating their victory and dividing the spoils to listen to concerns about absent enemies. After all, what could humans do from the vast emptiness between galaxies? They were just one species among thousands, and not even a particularly old or advanced one at that. As the session concluded and the various representatives departed to their home worlds, preparing to claim their new territories, none of them noticed the small, almost imperceptible changes beginning to occur in the systems humanity had abandoned. Equipment left behind seemed to hum with residual energy. Seemingly empty facilities showed strange readings on long-range sensors, and in the depths of space, automated systems continued to function according to protocols that none of the Council species had bothered to investigate. The humans had departed in silence, but they had not left empty-handed, nor had they left their former territories truly empty. 6 months after the great human exodus, the Galactic Council's member species had settled into their new territories with the satisfaction of predators claiming abandoned prey. The Vorthok Collective had established mining operations on 17 formerly human worlds, their efficiency-focused approach stripping resources at a rate that would have made human environmentalists weep. The ethereal dominion had transformed 3 crystal-rich planets into meditation retreats for their higher castes, while the Mercantile Union had converted the major trade hubs into profit-maximizing commercial centers. Trade Minister Gorthok stood in his new office aboard the massive space station that had once served as the human commercial hub of Kepler Station. The humans had called it a neutral meeting ground where species could conduct business without the interference of their governments. Now it was simply another asset in his ever-expanding commercial empire. The quarterly reports exceed all projections. His aide, a nervous Cathari functionary named Splice, informed him while reviewing data on a holographic tablet. Profits from the former human territories are up 300%. Efficiency is at an all-time high. Gorthok's rumbling laugh shook the station's bulkheads. Of course they are. No more human workers' rights nonsense. No more environmental protection regulations. No more of their ridiculous safety protocols. We're finally running these operations the way they should be run. What Gorthok didn't mention, because he didn't consider it worth noting, was the growing list of minor technical problems plaguing their operations. Equipment failures that seemed to occur at precisely the worst moments, computer glitches that corrupted data just when it was most needed, life support systems that occasionally developed irregularities that forced evacuations and costly repairs. The Vorthok were experiencing similar issues. Ambassador Zethkri, now serving as colonial administrator for the Vorthok territories in former human space, had submitted 17 separate reports about what he termed infrastructure instabilities. Mining equipment would malfunction just as valuable deposits were about to be extracted. Communication arrays would suffer mysterious interference during critical negotiations. Transport vessels would experience navigation errors that sent them far off course, costing time and fuel. It's almost as if the humans sabotaged everything before they left. Zefkri confided to his personal log during a particularly frustrating day when 3 separate mining operations had to be shut down to technical difficulties. But when the Vorthik engineering teams examined the equipment, they found no evidence of deliberate damage. Everything appeared to be functioning normally until it wasn't. The ethereal dominion was having their own problems. High Counselor Vexandra had taken personal residence on the most beautiful of the former human worlds, a planet called Haven that featured floating islands suspended above crystal seas by natural magnetic fields. The humans had lived there in harmony with the environment, their cities built to complement rather than dominate the landscape. Vexandra had ordered the human settlements demolished to make way for proper ethereal meditation complexes, but the demolition crews kept encountering unexpected complications. Buildings that should have fallen easily proved mysteriously resilient. Construction equipment would malfunction when attempting to clear human gardens. And the floating islands themselves seemed to be slowly shifting their positions, making the construction of permanent structures nearly impossible. The magnetic fields are fluctuating beyond acceptable parameters, reported her chief engineer, a pragmatic ethereal named Taksani. The patterns don't match any of our models. It's as if the planet itself is resistant to our presence. Vexandra dismissed such concerns as mere technical challenges. After all, they were dealing with technology left behind by a relatively young species. Surely their superior understanding would overcome any obstacles the humans had inadvertently created. But the problems weren't limited to just the major powers. The smaller species that had claimed portions of human territory were experiencing difficulties of their own. The peaceful worlds had taken control of several agricultural planets, only to discover that the automated farming systems had begun producing crops that, while technically edible, lacked proper nutritional content. The academic consortium found that research facilities they'd inherited contained databases that seemed to corrupt themselves whenever accessed, losing decades of human scientific research in cascading data failures. Young Representative Kale of the Peaceful Worlds was among the first to recognize a pattern in these seemingly unrelated incidents. During a routine council session, he presented his findings to a chamber that was initially dismissive but gradually grew more attentive as the scope of the problems became clear. Honored counselors, Kale began, his small form dwarfed by the massive speaking podium. I've been analyzing the technical difficulties reported across all former human territories, and I believe we're dealing with something more than simple equipment failures. He activated a holographic display showing a timeline of incidents across dozens of worlds. Notice the pattern. These aren't random breakdowns. They're targeted disruptions that occur at precisely the moments when they will cause maximum inconvenience and cost. Mining equipment fails just before major extractions. Communication systems malfunction during important negotiations. Life support systems develop problems during peak operational periods. Minister Gorthik's dismissive snort echoed through the chamber. Coincidence. Old equipment breaks down. That's why we're replacing it with superior technology. But that's just it, Kale continued, his voice grown stronger with conviction. The equipment isn't old. Most of it is newer and more advanced than what we're replacing it with. And the failures aren't random, they're surgical. Each incident causes maximum disruption while maintaining plausible stability as a technical malfunction. Counselor Thice uncoiled slightly, her interest piqued despite herself. Are you suggesting the humans left behind some form of sabotage program? I'm suggesting that the humans never intended to simply abandon their territory, Kale replied. I think they wanted us to take it. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. If Kale was right, if the humans had deliberately orchestrated their own exodus to lure the council species into claiming their territory, then every world they now controlled might be a potential trap. Admiral Keffer leaned forward in his seat, his warrior's instincts recognizing the tactical implications. You're saying this was all planned? That the humans wanted us to take their worlds? Think about it, Kale urged. Has anyone actually tried to contact the humans since they left? Have we sent probes to track their departure? Do we have any idea where they actually went or what they're doing out there in dark space? The uncomfortable silence that followed answered his questions more clearly than words could have. In their eagerness to claim the spoils of humanity's departure, none of the Council species had bothered to investigate the circumstances of that departure. They had simply assumed that the humans, faced with superior numbers and older, more established civilizations, had finally accepted defeat and retreated to lick their wounds in exile. But humans didn't retreat. They had never retreated in all their recorded history. They fought losing battles on principle. They charged into hopeless odds with weapons that shouldn't work against enemies they couldn't defeat. And somehow they found a way to win. The idea that they would simply give up and run away should have been recognized as fundamentally incompatible with everything the galaxy knew about human nature. Even if you're correct, High Counselor Vexandra said slowly, her translucent form shimmering with uncertainty, what could they possibly hope to accomplish? They're gone. We control their territory. What leverage could they have from beyond the galactic rim? As if in answer to her question, alarms began sounding throughout the council chamber. Emergency lights bathed the crystalline walls in red. As automated systems announced an incoming priority transmission, the central holographic display activated, and for the first time in 6 months, the council found themselves looking at a human face. The woman on the screen appeared to be middle-aged, with graying hair, and the kind of calm, confident expression that veteran diplomats wore when they held all the cards. She was seated in what appeared to be the command center of a starship, though the design was unlike anything in the Council's databases. Greetings, Galactic Council, she said, her voice carrying easily across the silent chamber. My name is Admiral Saracen, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Human Exodus Fleet. I apologize for the dramatic presentation, but I wanted to make sure had your full attention. The council members exchanged shocked glances. They had assumed that the humans' primitive communication technology wouldn't be able to reach them from outside the galaxy. The fact that this transmission was coming through clearly and without any sign of delay suggested that human technology had advanced far beyond what they had believed possible. By now, Admiral Chen continued, you've no doubt settled into our former territories and begun experiencing some technical difficulties. I want to assure you that these are not random equipment failures. They are reminders. Her expression hardened slightly, though her voice remained perfectly calm. Reminders that humans don't abandon anything, we don't retreat, we don't give up. When we appear to leave, it's because we're moving to a better position. And gentlemen, ladies, and distinguished beings of various configurations, we are now in a much better position. The transmission paused as Admiral Chen consulted something off-screen. When she looked back at the camera, there was something that might have been amusement in her eyes. You see, while you've been dividing up our old territories and congratulating yourselves on your victory, we've been busy. The galaxy is a big place, but the universe is infinitely bigger. And we've found some very interesting neighbors in the dark space beyond your charted regions. Neighbors who are very curious about the Galactic Council and your policies regarding your species. The blood drained from every face in the chamber that was capable of such a reaction. The implications of humanity making contact with unknown civilizations outside the galaxy were staggering. For all their technological advancement, the Council species had never ventured beyond the galactic rim. The space between galaxies was considered empty, lifeless, and impossibly vast, but humans had never been deterred by impossible odds. 3 days after Admiral Chen's transmission, the first reports began arriving from the outer systems. Ships of unknown design had appeared at the edge of Council space, not warships, but massive vessels that dwarfed even the largest Council dreadnoughts. They hung in space like silent monuments, making no aggressive moves, but also not responding to any attempts at communication. The ships were beautiful in an alien way, constructed from materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal while maintaining perfect structural integrity. Their design philosophy was unlike anything in the Council's extensive databases, combining organic curves with geometric precision in a way that suggested a completely different approach to engineering. High Councilor Vexandra convened an emergency session of the full Council, bringing together representatives from every member species for the first time since the humans' departure. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates tried to process the implications of humanity's apparent alliance with unknown extragalactic civilizations. Analysis of the vessels shows technology at least 2 orders of magnitude beyond our current capabilities, reported Chief Science Advisor Quelter of the Research Collective. The insectoid scientist's multiple eyes clicked and whirred as he processed data streams from dozens of monitoring stations. Energy signatures are completely unfamiliar. Propulsion systems appear to operate on principles we don't understand, and the materials. Our sensors can't even properly classify the whole composition. Admiral Kethfer stood at the tactical display, his scarred face grim as he reviewed the military implications. They've positioned themselves at strategic points throughout our space. Not aggressively, they're maintaining safe distances from inhabited systems, but they're clearly marking territory or making a statement. What kind of statement? Demanded Minister Gorthik, though his usually booming voice carried an edge of uncertainty. Before Admiral Kethfer could answer, the chamber's communication system activated, and once again Admiral Chen's calm face appeared on the central display. This time, however, she was not alone. Beside her stood a being that defied easy description, tall and graceful, with features that seemed to shift between organic and crystalline depending on the angle of view. Its presence radiated a sense of age and wisdom that made even the ancient council members feel like children. Council members, Admiral Chen said with the same diplomatic courtesy she might have used for a routine trade negotiation. I'd like you to meet Ambassador Nexus of the Confluence of Minds. The Confluence is a collective of civilizations that spans multiple galaxies and has existed for approximately 12 million of your standard years. The alien spoke, though its words came through in each delegate's native language simultaneously, a feat of translation that surpassed anything the Council's technology could achieve. Greetings, young ones. We have observed your galactic community with interest, particularly your treatment of emerging species. The humans have shared with us their experiences as members of your council. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. An intergalactic civilization that had existed for millions of years was now aware of the Galactic Council and had been briefed on their policies by humanity. Worse, they had apparently found those policies wanting. Councillor Theiss found her voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What do you want from us? Ambassador Nexus's features shifted into what might have been a smile. We want nothing from you. We are here at the invitation of our newest members to observe the transition of power in this region. Transition of power. High Councilor Vexandra's translucent form flickered with agitation. What transition? The Council has maintained galactic order for 3 millennia, has it? Admiral Chen interjected. Let's examine that claim. In the past millennium alone, the Council has suppressed the technological advancement of over 200 species, prevented the natural expansion of 47 civilizations, and maintained a rigid hierarchy that benefits only the oldest and most established powers. She gestured, and the display filled with data charts, graphs, and statistics that laid bare the Council's history of systematic oppression. You've created a system where new species are kept in perpetual servitude to old ones, where innovation is discouraged if it threatens established interests, where entire civilizations are kept at artificial development levels to maintain the status quo. That's not oppression, protested Minister Gorthik. That's order, that's stability. Without proper guidance, young species make mistakes. They start wars. They disrupt trade. They upset the balance that keeps the galaxy peaceful. Peaceful for whom? Admiral Chen asked pointedly. You've had peace. Certainly, the peace of the graveyard. The peace that comes from crushing the spirit of anyone who might challenge your authority. Ambassador Nexus stepped forward, its presence seeming to fill the chamber despite appearing only as a hologram. The Confluence has observed many galactic civilizations over the eons. We have seen this pattern before, older species creating systems that benefit themselves at the expense of the younger ones, justifying oppression as guidance, claiming that stagnation is stability. Its voice carried the weight of millions of years of observation. Such systems always fail, young ones. They fail because they are built on the false premise that wisdom comes with age alone, that experience matters more than innovation, that the way things have always been done, the way they should always be done. The chamber fell silent as the implication sank in. This was not just a diplomatic crisis, this was a fundamental challenge to everything the Council represented. The humans have asked us to serve as mediators in the restructuring of galactic governance. Ambassador Nexus continued, they have proposed a new model, one based on merit rather than age, on cooperation rather than domination, on growth rather than stagnation. Admiral Chen nodded. The human Exodus fleet will be returning to the galaxy within the next standard month. However, we won't be returning to our old territories. We'll be establishing new settlements in unclaimed systems throughout the spiral, arms, systems that you've declared unsuitable for colonization because they require actual innovation to make habitable. She paused, letting that sink in. We'll also be bringing with us representatives from 17 different extragalactic civilizations, all members of the Confluence. They're interested in establishing diplomatic and trade relationships with progressive galactic governments. The carrot was clear access to technology and knowledge beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. But so was the stick, of course. Admiral Chen continued with the same diplomatic courtesy. The Confluence only associates with civilizations that meet certain ethical standards. Systems of governance that suppress their own members or systematically oppress developing species are considered incompatible with Confluence values. High Counselor Vexandra S. Form had become almost completely transparent with shock. You're threatening us? Not at all. Ambassador Nexus replied. We are offering you a choice. Evolve or become irrelevant. The galaxy is changing. Young ones, the humans have shown you that change is possible. They left your systems not in defeat, but to grow beyond the limitations you tried to impose upon them. Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. We don't want to destroy the Council, we want to reform it. The galaxy needs governance, but it needs governance that serves all species, not just the oldest ones. It needs a system that encourages growth instead of stifling it. She gestured, and the display changed to show what appeared to be a constitutional framework, a new system of galactic governance that balanced the wisdom of age with the innovation of youth, that provided representation based on contribution rather than longevity, that encouraged technological advancement while maintaining stability. This is our proposal, Admiral Chen said. A new galactic confederation based on principles of equality, cooperation, and mutual advancement. Every species gets a voice proportional to their population and contribution to the common good, regardless of how long they've been in space. And, if we refuse, ask Admiral Kethver, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Ambassador Nexus's form shimmered with what might have been regret. Then you will find yourselves increasingly isolated as the galaxy grows beyond you. The humans are not the only species chafing under the current system. Many others have been waiting for someone to show them that change is possible. As if summoned by those words, new faces began appearing on the display, representatives from dozens of younger species that had been held back by Council policies. The Kethani, whose faster-than-light communication technology had been suppressed to protect established shipping interests. The Morden, whose biotechnology had been banned because it challenged traditional manufacturing. The Zephyri, whose energy manipulation abilities had been deemed dangerous for general use. All of them were speaking now, their voices joining in a chorus of long-suppressed grievances and demands for change. The uprising that the Council had always feared was happening, but it wasn't the chaotic rebellion they had imagined. It was organized, focused, and backed by powers beyond their ability to suppress. "You have 30 standard days to consider our proposal," Admiral Chen said as the transmission began to wind down. "During that time, all those technical difficulties you've been experiencing in former human territories will cease. Consider it a gesture of good faith." She paused, and for the first time, her diplomatic mask slipped slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "But let me be absolutely clear about something. The age of the old council is over. What happens next depends entirely on whether you choose to be part of the solution or an obstacle to progress." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Around the galaxy, on worlds that had once been human colonies, the mysterious technical failures that had plagued the new occupants suddenly stopped. Equipment began functioning perfectly, computer systems operated flawlessly. Life support systems ran without a single glitch. It was a demonstration of power more impressive than any weapon could have been. The humans had shown that they could make life difficult for the Council species even from beyond the galaxy. Now they were showing that they could make that difficulty disappear, and thus as easily. The message was clear. Humanity held all the cards now. The question was what the Council would choose to do about it. 20-8 days after the Confluence ultimatum, High Counselor Vexandra found herself standing alone in her private chambers, staring out at the stars through the massive transparent aluminum viewport. The past month had been a whirlwind of emergency sessions, heated debates, and increasingly desperate attempts to find a way to maintain the old order in the face of overwhelming pressure for change. The technical problems in former human territories had indeed ceased, but they had been replaced by something arguably worse: perfect efficiency. The automated systems left behind by the humans were now operating at optimal capacity, producing more resources, generating more energy, and managing logistics better than the Council species had ever achieved with their own technology. It was a constant reminder of just how advanced human technology had become during their brief membership in galactic civilization. Every perfectly calibrated mining operation, every flawlessly managed agricultural system, every seamlessly integrated transportation network served as evidence that the primitive humans had somehow leapfrogged ahead of species with millennia more experience. A soft chime announced an incoming message, and Vexandra's personal display activated to show the face of Admiral Kethver. The old warrior looked as tired as she felt, his scarred features drawn with the weight of impossible decisions. "The vote is tomorrow," he said without preamble. "The smaller species have already announced their support for the Confederation proposal. Even some of our traditional allies are wavering." Vexandra nodded wearily. The political landscape had shifted dramatically over the past month as more details of the new galactic government structure had emerged. The Human Confederation proposal wasn't the revenge fantasy that many council members had expected. Instead, it was a carefully crafted system that addressed most of the legitimate concerns about governance while dismantling the power structures that had kept older species in control. "The peaceful worlds formally withdrew from the council yesterday," Vexandra reported. "They've already begun implementing Confederation governmental structures in their territories. Yunkale has been appointed as their representative to the Transition Committee." Admiral Kethver's expression darkened. "And the humans' demonstration yesterday?" Vexandra suppressed a shudder. The humans had chosen to make their final argument, not through threats or displays of military power, but through an act of almost incomprehensible generosity. They had transmitted complete technical specifications for their advanced medical technology to every hospital and research facility in Council space, along with manufacturing instructions that would allow any species to produce the equipment. The technology was decades ahead of anything the Council possessed. It could regenerate lost limbs, cure genetic disorders that had been considered untreadable and extend lifespans for most species by significant margins. The humans had simply given it away, asking for nothing in return except consideration. Of their governmental proposals, 37 species have already announced their intention to implement human medical technology. Admiral Kethfer continued, "The Healing Conclave has declared the technology miraculous and formally endorsed the Confederation. The academic consortium is calling it the greatest scientific gift in galactic history. It was a master stroke of diplomatic strategy. The humans had shown that they weren't interested in conquest or revenge, they were interested in uplifting everyone. The contrast with the Council's policies of suppression and control could not have been more stark." "What about Gorthik and the Mercantile Union?" Vexandra asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "He's been organizing resistance among the industrial species," Admiral Kethfer reported, "but even his support is eroding. The humans released the specifications for their automated manufacturing systems last week. Union members are calculating profit margins, and they're realizing that cooperation will be more lucrative than resistance." Vexandra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3 millennia of galactic history pressing down on her translucent form. The Ethereal Dominion had been one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, helping to establish the systems and traditions that had maintained order for so long. The idea of abandoning all of that was almost physically painful, but the alternative was becoming increasingly clear. Species that embraced the new Confederation model were already showing dramatic improvements in quality of life, technological advancement, and economic prosperity. Meanwhile, the holdout species were finding themselves increasingly isolated as trade relationships shifted toward the more progressive governments. "There's something else," Admiral Kethfer said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Our intelligence networks have picked up reports of human exploration vessels in the outer spiral arms. They're not just returning to the galaxy, they're expanding into regions we never even considered worth investigating." "What kind of regions?" "Binary pulsars that should be uninhabitable, but somehow aren't. Rogue planets drifting in interstellar space that are showing signs of advanced civilizations. Star systems with gravitational anomalies that our physics say should be impossible." Admiral Kethfer leaned forward, and for the first time in years, Vexandra heard something like wonder in his voice. "They're not just technologically advanced anymore. They've learned things out there in dark space that have fundamentally changed their understanding of the universe, and they're sharing that knowledge with anyone willing to be part of their confederation." The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just offering political reform, they were offering access to knowledge and opportunities that the galaxy had never imagined. The choice wasn't between the old council and a new government. It was between stagnation and transcendence. A new chime announced another incoming transmission, and Vexandra's chamber filled with the familiar image of Admiral Chen. But this time, the human admiral was standing on what appeared to be the observation deck of a space station, unlike anything in the galactic databases. Through the viewport behind her, strange stars formed patterns that didn't match any known constellations. "High Counselor Vexandra," Admiral Chen said with genuine warmth in her voice, "I wanted to speak with you personally before tomorrow's vote. The Ethereal Dominion has always been known for its wisdom and long-term thinking. Your people were among the first to achieve interstellar travel, and your contributions to galactic culture have been immeasurable." Vexandra found herself straightening unconsciously, responding to the respect in the human's tone. "Admiral Chen, I confess I expected this conversation to be different. Different how?" "More adversarial. You have every reason to be bitter about the Council's treatment of humanity." Admiral Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "Bitter? No. Disappointed? Certainly. But bitter implies that we're looking backward, focusing on past injuries. Humanity has never been good at dwelling on the past when there are futures to explore." She gestured to the strange vista behind her. "Do you know where I am, High Counselor? This is the Nexus Station, located in the space between galaxies. From here, You can see 17 different galactic clusters, each one containing billions of stars and potentially trillions of worlds. The confluence spans all of them. The camera angle shifted to show more of the station, revealing a structure so vast that it defied comprehension. Ships from dozens of different civilizations moved through docking bays that could have held entire fleets. Beings of every conceivable form walked through corridors that seemed to blend architectural styles from across the known universe. This is what we're offering, Admiral Chen continued. Not just political reform, but a chance to be part of something bigger than any single galaxy. The Council spent millennia trying to maintain order in one small corner of the universe. The Confederation is offering membership in a community that spans creation itself. Vexandra felt her form solidifying with amazement. The scope of what the humans were describing was beyond anything the Council had ever imagined. They weren't just threatening the old order, they were offering to transcend it entirely. What assurance do we have, she asked, that humanity won't use this power to exact revenge for past treatment? Admiral Chen's smile was sad but understanding. Because revenge would mean we learn nothing from our time with the Council. Yes, we were frustrated by the restrictions and limitations you placed on us. But those frustrations taught us valuable lessons about the kind of government we wanted to build. She paused, looking directly into the camera with an intensity that made Vexandra feel as though the human admiral was standing right there in the chamber. We don't want to rule you, High Counselor, we want to grow alongside you. The universe is vast enough for everyone to find their place in it. The transmission continued for another hour as Admiral Chen outlined the specific provisions that had been made for existing council species in the new governmental structure. Far from being punitive, the proposals went out of their way to preserve the best aspects of the old system while eliminating the oppressive elements. When the conversation finally ended, Vexandra found herself alone with a choice that would determine not just the fate of her species, but the future of galactic civilization itself. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 30 days after the confluence ultimatum, but the chamber that gathered looked nothing like the confident assembly that had celebrated humanity's departure just months earlier. Representatives sat in tense clusters, their usual species-based alliances fractured by the weight of the decision before them. Minister Gorthik of the Mercantile Union had positioned himself at the center of what remained of the opposition, his massive form hunched over tactical displays showing economic projections and military assessments. Around him sat the representatives of the handful of species still committed to maintaining the old order, mostly older civilizations, whose power structures were so deeply entrenched that change seemed impossible. On the other side of the chamber, an unlikely coalition had formed around young Representative Kale of the Peaceful Worlds. Species that had barely spoken to each other under the old system now found themselves working together, united by shared frustration with council policies and excitement about the opportunities the Confederation offered. Between these two poles sat the undecided species caught between fear of change and recognition that the status quo was no longer sustainable. High Counselor Vexandra counted herself among them, though she knew that her decision would carry enormous weight among the wavering delegates. The session began with a final presentation from Ambassador Nexus of the Confluence. The ancient being's holographic form appeared before the assembly, its features shifting through configurations that suggested wisdom accumulated across geological ages. Young ones, Ambassador Nexus began, its voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. Before you make your decision, we want you to understand exactly what you are choosing between. This is not merely a question of governmental structure, it is a choice between two fundamentally different approaches to existence itself. The central display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with current council territories highlighted in red. The map was depressingly small, showing how the established species had claimed only the most easily habitable systems while leaving vast regions unexplored and unexploited. Under your current system, Ambassador Nexus continued, civilization has achieved a certain stability by limiting growth and suppressing innovation. You have peace because you have stagnation. You have order because you have prevented the chaos that comes with rapid change. The display shifted, showing projections of continued council governance. The red zones representing civilization expanded slowly, following predictable patterns that would take thousands of years to explore even a fraction of the galaxy's potential. But consider the alternative. The display changed again, and now the galaxy blazed with light as new projection models showed the potential growth under Confederation governance. Entire spiral arms lit up with projected settlements. Previously impossible systems became viable through advanced technology. The timeline accelerated, showing centuries of expansion compressed into decades. The humans have shown us scans of your galaxy taken with confluence sensors, Ambassador Nexus explained as the displays zoomed in on specific systems. There are wonders here that your current exploration protocols would never discover, civilizations in exotic environments that your safety regulations would never allow you to contact, technologies emerging from unique stellar phenomena that your risk-averse policies would never permit you to study. Representative Kale stood slowly, his small form dwarfed by the speaking platform, but his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Honored Nexus, could you show us some specific examples? The display shifted to show a binary system where two neutron stars orbited each other in a complex dance. The radiation and gravitational forces should have made the region completely uninhabitable, but the sensors showed massive structures surrounding both stars, artificial constructs that were somehow harvesting energy from the stellar collision. The Zephyr Builders, Ambassador Nexus explained. A silicon-based civilization that thrives in high-radiation environments. They have been trying to contact your council for over 2 centuries, but your first contact protocols classify their region as uninhabitable and prohibit exploration. Another image appeared: a rogue planet drifting in interstellar space, its surface covered with cities that glowed with bioluminescent energy. The Void Wanderers, a nomadic species that travels between star systems on rogue planets they've hollowed out and converted into generation ships. They possess technology for surviving in deep space that would revolutionize your understanding of interstellar travel. More examples followed, each one representing an opportunity for advancement that the Council's conservative policies had prevented them from pursuing. It was a damning indictment of a system that chose security over progress at every turn. Minister Gorthik rose from his position, his voice booming across the chamber with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Impressive displays, but what guarantee do we have that these so-called opportunities won't prove to be catastrophes? The Council's conservative approach exists for good reasons. We've prevented wars, avoided ecological disasters, and maintained stability for 3 millennia, have you? Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chamber as her holographic form materialized alongside Ambassador Nexus. Or have you simply hidden the costs of your stability? New data appeared on the display's information that made several representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Economic analyses showing how council policies had condemned entire species to permanent second-class status. Demographic studies revealing declining birth rates among older species as they became increasingly risk-averse. Social indicators demonstrating growing discontent among younger civilizations. Your stability has come at the cost of progress. Admiral Chen continued. Your peace has been maintained by suppressing anyone who might disturb it. Your order has been preserved by preventing the natural growth and development of galactic civilization. She gestured, and the display showed footage from human colonies, not the abandoned territories the Council had claimed, but new settlements in previously unexplored systems. The images were breathtaking. Cities that floated in the atmospheres of gas giants, mining operations that turned asteroids into garden worlds, research stations that studied impossible stellar phenomena. This is what we've accomplished in 6 months of freedom, Admiral Chen said simply. Imagine what we could accomplish together in 6 years, or 60 years, or 6 centuries. The chamber erupted in heated discussion as delegates argued among themselves about the implications of what they were seeing. Some were clearly impressed by the scope of human achievement, while others seemed frightened by the pace of change it represented. High Counselor Vexandra found herself studying the faces of her fellow delegates, reading the conflict in their expressions. The older species were clearly struggling with the concept of abandoning systems that had served them for millennia. The younger species were practically vibrating with excitement at the opportunities being presented. She activated her speaking platform, and her translucent form solidified as she prepared to address the chamber. I have a question for Admiral Chen. Under this new confederation, what happens to species that choose to maintain their traditional ways? What becomes of those who prefer stability to rapid change? Admiral Chen's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine understanding. High Counselor, the Confederation is not about forcing change on anyone. It's about removing artificial barriers to growth and allowing each species to develop according to their own nature and desires. The display changed to show the governmental structure of the proposed confederation in detail. Conservative species that prefer slower development would be free to maintain that approach. The difference is that their choices would be genuine preferences rather than imposed limitations. And if they ever decided they wanted to try something new, the resources and support would be available to help them do so safely. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of personal experience. The Council never gave humanity the choice to develop slowly. We were forced into stagnation whether we wanted it or not. The Confederation is offering everyone the choice to find their own path. Counselor Theiss uncoiled from her speaking platform, her serpentine form moving with the fluid grace of her species. And what of the wisdom that comes with age? What of the experience that prevents younger species from making catastrophic mistakes? Experience is valuable, Ambassador Nexus replied, but only if it leads to wisdom rather than rigid thinking. The confluence includes civilizations that are millions of years older than any in your galaxy, yet they continue to learn and grow and change. The ancient being's form shifted to show patterns of light that somehow conveyed both age and vitality. True wisdom lies not in preventing all mistakes, but in helping others learn from their errors and grow beyond them. The Council's approach has been to prevent growth rather than guide it. The debate continued for hours, with representatives from dozens of species voicing their concerns and asking increasingly detailed questions about the proposed changes. Gradually, a picture emerged of a governmental system that was radically different from anything the galaxy had ever seen, yet carefully designed to address the legitimate needs of all member species. As the discussion wore on, the battle lines became increasingly clear. The species that had benefited most from the old system remained opposed to change, while those that had been held back by Council policies grew more enthusiastic about the opportunities the Confederation offered. But, perhaps most significantly, the uncommitted middle was beginning to shift. Representatives who had seemed uncertain at the beginning of the session were asking increasingly specific questions about implementation timelines and transition procedures. The tone was changing from whether to how. Finally, as the session approached its 10th hour, High Counselor Vexandra called for order and announced that the time for debate had ended. The vote would proceed according to traditional council procedures, with each member species casting their ballot in order of their entry into galactic civilization. The Ethereal Dominion, as one of the founding species, would vote first. Vexandra stood at her platform, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her translucent form. 3 millennia of tradition hung in the balance. The governmental system that had shaped galactic civilization since before most current species had achieved space flight was about to be judged by those who had lived under its rule. The Ethereal Dominion, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber, votes to accept the Confederation proposal and begin immediate transition procedures. The chamber erupted in surprise. Many had expected the ancient species to resist change until the bitter end. But Vexandra had recognized something that some of her colleagues had missed. The Confederation wasn't destroying the old order, it was fulfilling its original promise. One by one, the other species cast their votes. The peaceful worlds voted yes. As expected, the academic consortium voted yes after a brief internal conference. The research collective voted yes with obvious enthusiasm. When it came time for the mercantile union to vote, Minister Gorthik stood in silence for several long minutes, his massive form hunched with what might have been defeat or deep thought. Finally, he straightened and looked directly at Admiral Chen's holographic form. The mercantile union, he said slowly, recognizes that change is inevitable. We vote yes, but we reserve the right to negotiate specific terms regarding our industrial territories. Admiral Chen nodded respectfully. Of course, Minister, the Transition Committee will work with each species to ensure their specific needs are addressed. In the end, the vote was not even close. 47 species voted to accept the Confederation proposal. Only 3 voted to maintain the old council system, and even they indicated willingness to negotiate transition terms. As the final tallies were announced, something unprecedented happened in the Galactic Council chambers. Representatives from dozens of different species began talking to each other not through formal diplomatic channels, but as colleagues working toward common goals. Age-old barriers between species began to dissolve as they discussed implementation, plans, and shared resources. Admiral Chen's holographic form smiled as she watched the transformation beginning to unfold. "Welcome to the Galactic Confederation," she said simply. "Let's build something amazing together." 1 year later, Ambassador Sarah Chen, no longer an admiral, but now the first elected Secretary General of the Galactic Confederation, stood in the observation lounge of Harmony Station, the new governmental complex that orbited the Galactic Center. Through the massive transparent aluminum viewports, she could see ships from over 70 different species coming and going, their diverse designs creating a tapestry of technological achievement that would have been impossible under the old council system. The transformation had been more rapid and more successful than anyone had dared hope. The removal of artificial restrictions on technological development had triggered an innovation boom that was reshaping galactic civilization. Species that had been held back for centuries were making breakthrough discoveries on a weekly basis. Old enemies were becoming research partners. Impossible projects were becoming routine achievements. The quarterly reports show growth rates that our economists are still struggling to believe. Reported Dr. Kale, the former young representative, had been elected as the Confederation's first Minister of Development. His small species had proven remarkably adept at managing the complex logistics of galactic transformation. 17 species have achieved breakthrough technologies in just the past 3 months. The Zephyr Builders have shared their stellar engineering techniques with 12 different civilizations. The Void Wanderers have established 3 new deep space colonies using their rogue planet technology. Chen nodded, though her attention was focused on a particular ship approaching the station's docking bays. It was a sleek vessel of human design, but its hull bore the insignia of multiple species, the first truly integrated crew in galactic history. The ship represented something that would have been unthinkable under the old council system: cooperation born of choice rather than necessity. "Any word from the Confluence Evaluation Committee?" she asked. "They're impressed," Kale replied with obvious satisfaction. "Ambassador Nexus reports that our transition has been smoother than most they've observed. Apparently, some civilizations take centuries to fully implement Confederation-style governance. We've managed it in 12 months. The success wasn't without its challenges. Some of the older species were still struggling to adapt to the pace of change. The Ethereal Dominion had requested assistance in restructuring their traditional meditation practices to incorporate new technologies. The Vorthic Collective was working with human engineers to retrofit their mining operations for greater efficiency and environmental responsibility. But even the difficulties were being addressed through cooperation rather than conflict. Where the old council would have imposed solutions from above, the Confederation was encouraging species to work together to find approaches that respected everyone's needs and values. Secretary General came a voice from behind them, and Chen turned to see High Counselor Vexandra approaching. The ethereal's translucent form was more solid than Chen had ever seen it, suggesting a level of emotional stability that had been absent during the final council sessions. High Counselor, sorry. Senator Vexandra, Chen corrected herself with a smile. The former council members had been offered positions in the new government structure, and most had accepted roles that utilized their experience while limiting their ability to suppress other species. I wanted to personally thank you, Vexandra said, her voice carrying a warmth that transcended species barriers. When we first voted to accept the Confederation proposal, I feared we were abandoning everything our civilization had built. Instead, we've discovered aspects of ourselves that we never knew existed. She gestured toward the viewport, where a group of mixed-species research vessels was departing for the galactic rim. My people are participating in exploration missions for the first time in over 1,000 years. Our younglings are studying at multi-species universities. Our philosophers are engaging with ideas that challenge assumptions we've held for millennia. Chen followed her gaze to the ships. Each vessel represented a small miracle of cooperation. Species that had barely acknowledged each other's existence under the Council were now working together on projects that pushed the boundaries of known science. The fear was understandable. Chen replied diplomatically. Change is always frightening, especially when it happens quickly, but your species adapted to it beautifully. The Ethereal Dominion's contributions to our deep space exploration program have been invaluable. It was true. The Ethereal's natural ability to exist partially in subspace had proven crucial for navigation in the strange regions beyond the galactic rim. Combined with human technological innovation and other species' unique capabilities, they were exploring areas of the universe that no single civilization could have reached alone. There's something else, Vexandra continued, her form shimmering with what Chen had learned to recognize as excitement. Our exploration teams have made a discovery. Something that validates everything the Confederation stands for. The viewport display activated, showing sensor readings from a distant star system at the very edge of the galaxy. The data was unlike anything in the Confederation's database's energy signatures that suggested technology even more advanced than what the Confluence possessed. We found them, Vexandra said simply. The predecessors. Chen felt her breath catch. The predecessors were legendary and ancient civilization that supposedly had existed in the galaxy millions of years ago, before disappearing without a trace. Most species considered them a myth, but the Confluence had suggested that they might have simply moved beyond the need for physical existence. Sensor data indicates a massive artificial construct in the Omega Centauri region, Dr. Kale added, his voice tight with excitement. It's been hidden by some kind of cloaking technology that makes it invisible to all known sensor types. We only found it because the ethereals can perceive subspace directly. The implications were staggering. If the predecessors still existed and could be contacted, they might possess knowledge that could advance galactic civilization by millions of years. Under the old council system, such a discovery would have been classified and restricted to the oldest species. Under the Confederation, it would be shared with everyone. The joint exploration fleet departs next week, Vexandra continued. 50 ships representing 37 different species. The largest cooperative venture in galactic history. Chen smiled, feeling a familiar surge of the excitement that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. And I suppose you want human participation in the mission. Actually, Vexandra said, her translucent form brightening with what might have been amusement, we were hoping you'd consider leading it. The Confederation Council voted unanimously to offer you command of the expedition. The offer was unexpected but not entirely surprising. In the year since the Confederation's formation, Chen had proven herself to be not just an effective administrator, but also someone who could bridge the gaps between radically different species and ways of thinking. Her leadership had been crucial in the smooth transition from Council to Confederation governance. I'm honored, Chen replied, But I should point out that I'm no longer a military officer. I'm a civilian administrator now, which is exactly why you're the right choice," Dr. Kale interjected. "This isn't a military mission, it's a diplomatic one. We're not going to conquer or claim territory. We're going to make contact with beings who might be older than our entire galaxy. We need someone who understands that wisdom comes in many forms." Chen looked out at the bustling traffic around Harmony Station, watching ships from dozens of species working together with an efficiency that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. The transformation of galactic civilization had exceeded even her most optimistic projections. Perhaps it was time for humanity to take the next step in that transformation. "When do we leave?" she asked the joint expedition fleet that assembled at the galaxy's edge 3 weeks later was unlike anything that had ever been seen in known space. 50 ships representing the best technology and most brilliant minds from throughout the Confederation, united in pursuit of knowledge that might revolutionize their understanding of existence itself. The human vessels contributed their advanced sensor arrays and innovative propulsion systems. The ethereal ships provided subspace navigation capabilities. The Zephyr builders offered their expertise in dealing with exotic stellar phenomena. Dozens of other species brought their own unique abilities to the mission. As Secretary General, Chen stood on the bridge of the expedition flagship, watching the impossible sight of the galactic edge approaching through the viewports. She reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Less than 2 years ago, humanity had been a restricted species living under the thumb of a government that valued stability over progress. Now they were leading a galactic expedition to contact beings that might predate recorded history. "All ships report ready for transgalactic jump," reported the Navigator, a multi-species AI that had been developed through Confederation cooperative research programs. "Signal from the confluence," added the communications officer, a Peaceful Worlds delegate whose species had proven remarkably skilled at interspecies coordination. "Ambassador Nexus wishes us luck and reminds us that we're representing not just our galaxy, but all the younger civilizations in the local cluster." Chen nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders. But it was a good weight, the weight of opportunity rather than obligation, of growth rather than stagnation. "Take us into the unknown," she ordered. As the fleet jumped into the darkness between galaxies, heading toward a rendezvous with beings that might hold the keys to transcendence itself, Chen couldn't help but smile. The humans had left the galaxy in silence, dismissed as failures by a council that valued age over innovation. Now they were returning as leaders of a civilization that spanned species and star systems, united in their commitment to growth, exploration, and the endless pursuit of what lay beyond the next horizon. The council had thought themselves untouchable, secure in their ancient authority and rigid traditions. They had learned, perhaps too late, that the universe belonged to those willing to grow rather than those content to simply endure. And in the vast darkness beyond the galactic rim, ancient intelligences that had watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations stirred with interest as they observed this latest group of young beings taking their first steps toward true cosmic citizenship. The real adventure was just beginning.